Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story. President Trump says he doesn't want a war with China, but that the U.S. is well equipped to handle a potential conflict. Plus, more on why Trump said he wouldn't show Elon Musk his war strategy.
We don't want to have a potential war with China, but I can tell you if we did, we're very well equipped to handle it.
The State Department offering an up to $15 million reward for information about these 4 Chinese nationals. Authorities say they smuggled critical tech parts from the U.S. to Iran, and those sales helped Iranian terrorists make a fortune. Nvidia announcing a plan to invest hundreds of billions in U.S.-based microchip making over the next 4 years. More on the Trump administration's push for companies to make their products here at home. And President Trump invoking emergency powers to boost U.S. production of critical minerals. More on the need to cut U.S. reliance on imports from China. President Trump on Friday said his administration would not show Elon Musk any of the Pentagon's plans for a potential war with China, citing the Tesla CEO's business in the country. He also noted that the U.S. is, quote, very well equipped to handle such a conflict.
But I don't want other people seeing potential war with China. We don't want to have a potential war with China, but I can tell you if we did, we're very well equipped to handle it.
This comes after a New York Times report said that Musk would be briefed on the U.S. military top-secret plan if war was to break out with China. The report cited unnamed sources. Trump said the report was false. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said the meeting referred to by the article was an informal one about innovation, efficiency, and smarter production strategies. Trump went on to explain why he wouldn't show Musk the wartime plan.
He's a great patriot. He's paying a big price for helping us cut costs, and he's doing a great job. He's finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse. But I certainly wouldn't want, Elon has businesses in China, and he would be susceptible perhaps to that.
China is Tesla's largest market outside the U.S., and Beijing has been watching Musk with growing interest, a person who has Trump's ear, as well as extensive business ties in China. Chinese news outlets have come out with articles speculating about whether Musk would ease U.S.-China tensions. If Musk were to get access to top-secret China briefings, it could spark potential conflicts of interest, as he would get information about China that isn't available to his competitors. Hegseth says the New York Times report has its own agenda.
It was a fake story. We pointed out it was meant to sort of undermine whatever relationship the Pentagon has with Elon Musk.
In a recent strategic guidance memo, Secretary Hegseth directed Pentagon leaders to shift focus and resources towards a possible conflict with China. The State Department this week put a $15 million bounty on 4 Chinese nationals, asking for more information on their whereabouts. They're accused of illegally exporting U.S. know-how to Iran, which helps fund Iranian terrorists, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Force. A Chinese woman named Emily Liu is the ringleader of the Chinese smuggling group. She is facing several criminal counts in the U.S., including illegally smuggling sanctioned goods from the U.S. and selling them to Iran. She's also charged with deceiving U.S. authorities with misleading export information. The State Department said Liu's scheme dates back to 2007, when she started selling U.S.-made electronic components to Iran through numerous Chinese front companies. These U.S. dual-use products can be used to advance production of various armaments, including ballistic missile systems and drones. They're also covered by sanctions and thus should never be sold to Iran. For years, Liu's companies would first smuggle sanctioned items from the U.S., then ship them through mainland China and Hong Kong to Iran. Her clients included the Iranian regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, plus its various branches, which are designated as foreign terrorist organizations by the U.S. The IRGC provides financial, logistical, and military support to numerous terrorist attacks around the globe. That covers Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and various Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. Through an array of front companies, the IRGC and its followers earned millions of dollars. That money eventually cycled back to funding more terror groups and activities. Now, Liu and her conspirators are on the FBI's most wanted list. The FBI issued arrest warrants on them last January, but the group is still at large. Based on the State Department's Rewards for Justice page on X, dozens of Chinese fugitives are of interest to the U.S. government. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday consolidating federal purchases in an agency called the General Services Administration. The White House says the move is to eliminate waste and boost efficiency in federal purchases. On the supply chain front, Trump also greenlit an order that seeks to strengthen mineral production in the United States. This decision comes amid concerns that Communist China is seeking dominance in these critical materials. Meanwhile, a senator from Montana, Steve Daines, is in Beijing. He said he would speak with Chinese officials about curbing the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., reducing the U.S. trade deficit with China, and ensuring fair market access for Montana farmers. The Republican arrived in Beijing off the back of a meeting with top leaders in Vietnam. His visit comes after President Trump slapped 20% tariffs on China, and Beijing retaliated with 15% duties on U.S. farm goods. Daines is the first member of Congress to visit Beijing since Trump took office in January. He previously worked as an executive in China and served as a go-between during Trump's first term in office. China's foreign ministry said China welcomed Daines. He represents Montana, where a Chinese spy balloon was spotted in 2023. That balloon was able to gather intelligence from several U.S. military sites before it was shot down. Montana was the first state to introduce a ban on the Chinese app TikTok. Nvidia plans to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S.-made chips and electronics over the next 4 years. The White House made the announcement Friday, quoting CEO Jensen Huang.
According to a White House statement, Huang said having the support of an administration who cares about the success of this industry and not allowing energy to be an obstacle is a phenomenal result for AI in the U.S. According to an interview with Financial Times, Huang has been trying to dispel investor concerns about Nvidia's demand for expensive AI chips. That's after China's DeepSeek launched a cheap AI model. Huang said Nvidia can now manufacture its latest systems in the U.S. through foreign suppliers. These include Taiwanese chip-making giants TSMC and Foxconn. Huang also noted a growing competitive threat from Chinese telecom firm Huawei.
U.S. Army soldiers indicted for spying for the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese hackers breaching telecom giant Verizon and AT&T. American thought leader host Jan Jekielek sat down with Congressman Rich McCormick to talk about the China threat. He is a decorated veteran who served for over 20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and U.S. Navy. Let's dive in.
Congressman Rich McCormick, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
It's great to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
So recently, 3 U.S. Army soldiers were indicted for spying for the CCP, for the Chinese Communist Party. What's your reaction?
We've had this problem in the past with Russia. You can see we have a new peer adversary. China has taken the place of Russia as our greatest adversary, our greatest threat. They're on par with us militarily. They have a greater population. They're closing the gap with us on GDP. So in other words, as an economic power, much more powerful than Russia ever was. When you make the side-by-side comparisons, we used to be worried about Russia. Remember, we were competing with them. And we used to have Reagan talk about Russia and the USSR. Collectively, the USSR was never on par with us. They didn't have the ability to have an economic powerhouse like China does. They didn't have the military that could actually match up with us like China does. If you look at the GDPs comparatively, Russia has a GDP at roughly the size of Texas by itself, $2 trillion. To compare that to Europe, which has about a $20 trillion economy, compared to the United States, which has a $27 trillion economy. This whole idea that Russia can invade Ukraine and not lose drastically is ridiculous. I mean, combined, we have a $47 trillion economy. Now, I understand that Ukraine has about 1/5 the population, about 1/20 the economy, but when supported by 2 great forces, we should be able to deal with Russia in short order, not just militarily, but economically, make it very difficult for them to proceed in this war. In the same way with China, they're not the same as Russia. they're much more dangerous. The way they've cheated since they joined the World Trade Organization about 20 years ago, by tripling their economy, by stealing secrets, by subverting everything that's good in the United States. It's just manifested in this new spy rig. We used to do this with Russia all the time. Now China is our main enemy. We should be wary that, first of all, it's not just those service members that should be prosecuted, but China should also be punished for what they've done.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, let's look at a few other things. Recently, there were 12 hackers that were indicted for work over something like at least a 7-year period against Defense Intelligence Agency, Department of Commerce, us, the Epoch-Times, multiple, and they're still at large from what we know.
And that's the hard thing to do. We have some really neat cybersecurity going on right now. I'm actually on the cybersecurity subcommittee in Armed Services. I also was on the AI task force. Watching a Marine with a computer actually go to war is really cool. When I was growing up, I didn't even have a computer. When I went to college the entire time with no computer, learned how to use a computer in the Marine Corps, which is a dangerous thing. But now we have these guys who are cybersecurity experts, Marines who literally go to war with foreign adversaries and take down cells. I think it's really cool, but this is a dangerous place. We're going to have quantum technologies come online. We're having developed AI. You can see what China did in that arena recently, making it very cheap. It's not better, but it's cheaper, and it's going to revolutionize the way we do production on AI and AI chips. But they are, once again, not friendly to us. These guys are trying to do us harm.
But, what about, DeepSeek being available on, I don't know how many Americans have downloaded that onto their phones. Do you see an issue with that?
Heck yeah. Think about what they're putting on their phone, just like TikTok. They can track where you are, what you do, what you get online with. The reason we got rid of TikTok is not only to collect valuable information from your personal information, but it also tries to influence you. It guides you to whatever their truth is. They're going to try to control the truth, confuse us, confound the issues, and deceive the American public on what the truth is.
But Congressman, on the question of TikTok, the jury seems still out.
So that's confounding to me too. I'll say we made a law. The Senate confirmed this. The president signed it into law. I don't care if it's Biden, Trump, anybody. We made a law. We did it for a reason, because TikTok is not a good actor. It's owned and essentially influenced by the CCP to influence our children. Not to become scientists, not to educate us, but to make them into influencers. Influencers based on what standard? On anybody who supports a Chinese agenda. And not just Chinese, I'm talking about the CCP agenda. So if you want to be an influencer, you have to agree with their defaults, which means that you're an influencer now for the CCP. Shame on us for doing anything that would support that. Now, I get it. It could be useful to President Trump, but you know what? Not without a cost. And to me, this isn't about a president. This isn't about the influence of one person. It's about an influence of a very bad actor that owns the TikTok brand, and that is the CCP. We need to get away from it, and get away from it fast. And we need to make laws that are more comprehensive to keep them from coming up with other technologies and other venues to get through to our children and own our populace and influence them in very bad ways.
Coming up, the U.S. sanctions a Chinese oil refinery to target Iranian oil sales. The action comes as President Trump tries to press Tehran to agree to nuclear talks. Ottawa strongly condemns China for executing 4 Canadian citizens, despite its calls for clemency. Critics point to tensions between Beijing and Ottawa, saying the case could reflect what critics call the communist regime's hostage diplomacy. And a growing number of Chinese restaurants are shutting their doors. A look at why and what it says about the state of China's economy. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The U.S. has brought sanctions on a Chinese oil refinery and a port over their links to Iran. It marks a first for Washington, which has never before cracked down on independent Chinese refiners.
Chinese independent oil refiners are known as teapots and are the largest purchasers of Iranian oil. They have, up until now, escaped U.S. blacklists. The U.S. Treasury said both a teapot refiner and its CEO in China's Shandong province are being sanctioned, along with a port terminal operator related to the oil trade in Guangdong province. The U.S. Treasury says Chinese oil refiners are providing the financial lifeline propping up the Iranian regime, and that the U.S. wants to cut off Iran's financing of terrorism as well as its nuclear development. Now, Iranian oil shipments to China make make up over 10% of Chinese crude oil imports.
The families of 4 Canadian citizens are in mourning after Canada confirmed Wednesday that China executed their loved ones earlier this year. Canada strongly condemned Beijing's use of the death penalty, calling out the country for negating Ottawa's calls for restraint. A Beijing spokesperson responded Thursday, saying China treats criminals equally regardless of their nationalities, and urged Canada not to interfere with China's judicial sovereignty. These 4 Canadians were charged for smuggling drugs in China. Little information was provided about their cases. Critics describe these situations as China's hostage diplomacy. They say Beijing seeks to pressure foreign governments through arbitrary arrests and opaque legal proceedings against their citizens. For example, the most recent execution comes after Canada imposed 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles last October, following Washington's lead. Ottawa also criticized Beijing for meddling in Canada's elections and condemned Beijing for human rights abuses in recent years. There's at least one other Canadian facing the death penalty in China, and it's a familiar script. A Chinese court handed him the death penalty after just 1 day of retrial. It happened 1 month after Ottawa arrested Meng Wanzhou, an executive for Chinese telecom giant Huawei. The Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly told reporters that Ottawa is negotiating with China to avoid capital punishment for future cases. Inside China, the stories of many failed restaurants seem to mirror the country's battered economy. Analysts say a restaurant in China has an average lifespan of just about 500 days. That figure falls as low as 1 year for establishments in Beijing. Let's zoom in.
When a restaurant dies in China, it can look something like this. Hauling out huge fridges, industrial stoves, and bread ovens to cart away for resale. It's good business for this team, led by An Da-wei, known as the restaurant undertaker. Behind every appliance is another tale of failed restaurants here in Beijing, part of a wider story of China's slow economy.
This shop behind me, this is actually the second time we've dismantled it. 2 years ago, the previous owner also contacted us to recycle the restaurant's kitchenware. Just around the corner, there's another one we acquired right before Chinese New Year. We come to this area quite frequently since restaurant closures happen often here.
Last year, An and his team dismantled 200 restaurants each month, which they say is 2.5 times more than the year before. Numbers from data company Chi show that last year saw 3 million catering companies shut down across China. An, the undertaker, says many failed restaurants were started by people investing their life savings, hoping for a V-shaped recovery after the pandemic.
At the beginning of 2023, we saw an increasing number of people from the real estate, education, finance, and internet industries entering the restaurant business. These industries experienced mass layoffs, leaving many unemployed with little to do. With some severance payouts in hand, they opted to invest in the restaurant industry. Since larger businesses require significant startup capital, many saw the restaurant business as something they could manage.
But things turned out differently. China's economy stayed sluggish, and consumers cut back on dining out. That led to a race to the bottom. Businesses repeatedly lowering prices to outdo each other, which in turn ate into profits. As restaurant closures rise, An says even long-established businesses are at risk.
Restaurants that have been operating for more than 5 years made up more than 9% of our collection of closed restaurants. Previously, we had never seen such a high number of long-established restaurants shutting down. This indicates that even experienced restaurant owners with deep industry knowledge are still losing money. I believe this reflects a significant decline in consumer spending. People simply aren't dining out as much as before.
In February this year, consumer prices dropped the most since January 2024, raising worries about a possible deflationary spiral. An said in first-tier cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, the monthly restaurant closure rate exceeds 10%, and in some months, it even surpasses 15%. He says that means for an average person, opening a restaurant is almost a guaranteed failure.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.